Hey, so before we get into today's lesson, two quick things. First of all, thank you to everybody who is doing the Bible reading challenge, whether you're doing the Ecclesiastes or the Proverbs one. I've had several people actually send me messages throughout the week, and I've really enjoyed those. So please keep those coming. I want to do something with some of this feedback that I'm getting. It definitely helps a little bit in trying to prepare even for messages, here on Sundays. So please keep that coming. So the second thing is that I know a lot of times the conversation kind of goes in different directions and can go on, and you don't want to cut it off. So what I would say is this: today in particular for this message, this gets kind of a little bit maybe philosophical. So that being said, it doesn't really all tie together until the very end. So what I would say is this: as you guys get to talking and you get to discussing things, if you get to that second question and it's going a little bit long, why don't you jump back in and watch the tail end of the video just so it ties it all in together. And then if you want to jump back into your pick up your conversation on that second discussion question, feel free to. But that last little bit is really going to bring everything together and make a lot of sense out of something that might otherwise admittedly be kind of a difficult or heavy concept. So anyway, hope you get a lot out of this, and look forward to hearing more of your feedback about what God's doing in your life through the Bible reading challenge. An info hazard is something that is a piece of information that once it is heard, it can cause some amount of discomfort, maybe even some sort of existential dread or anxiety. Well, today I want to bring up something that could be considered an info hazard, but to me it's something that's actually quite amazing, and if you really think about it, it can actually be incredibly beautiful. And that's this. Well, I'm very interested in the stars and astronomy and things like that. I always have been. It's one of the reasons why a lot of times the motifs I'll use around videos and whatnot involve things that look a lot like the stars. Well, one night as I was sitting here staring at things through my telescope, I remember looking up and just thinking about these things moving silently in space. I mean, it's something you really can't get away from, especially when you're looking with kind of a non-computerized telescope and you can actually see the rotation of the Earth in your field of view. And as this is happening, I just start thinking about these things that exist that are, millions of years old, billions of years old. I mean, even that some of the light that you're looking at itself is just so unfathomably old. And that means it existed well before I was here. And what that also means is that everything that I'm seeing right now, assuming it hasn't already been destroyed and that information just hasn't gotten to us yet, it will still be here when I am long gone. All of a sudden I started thinking about these things that exist in nature and how, the moment that I will one day pass away from this earth, everything will continue moving. The earth will continue spinning. The stars will continue moving around in the heavens, and the planets will continue orbiting the sun. All these things will continue working just as God created them. And in that moment, I felt the insignificance of my life. Now that might sound depressing, but there's actually something that's quite beautiful in there. The fact that all of these things that I often consider so important and so critically serious in my own life, the fact that those things don't really matter in the scope of eternity means I don't have to be held back by those things. Those things don't have to define me, and they don't have to define my value. Well, what you guys are going to sit here and read in your groups is you're going to read something that those of you doing the Bible reading challenge have already read. I want you to read the beginning of Ecclesiastes, and as you read the beginning of this first chapter, I want you to think about all of the things that this world will tell you are so critically important that you must care about it, that you have to have an opinion about it, or else you're not really being a responsible adult. And as you think about all these things, I want you to ask a very basic question. Why does this world tell me that I have to care about these things so much? What are they telling me that I should be living for? Now, I know that may sound a little heavy or maybe even a little too philosophical, but there really is something that applies directly to our lives here. You see, when we start taking stock of all the things that the world tells us we have to care about, and then we start asking ourselves, why does this really matter? More often than not, what we're going to find is that the root cause of concern here is ourselves. It's our sense of ego, whether individually our sense of ego or our sense of ego as a people. Religious individuals do this too. We'll sit here and start fooling ourselves into thinking that, the way I understand the Bible and the way that we have interpreted the Bible today with everything we know is the way that it was meant to be read. That's a form of arrogance. I wonder how many different ways people have read the Bible over the last 2,000 years and thought that they had it exactly the perfect way. People who think that they have figured out the perfect way that pleases God to worship and that anything else is just disrespectful or irreverent. How arrogant is that to think that somehow, yep, you know what? All these other generations of Christians totally messed it up, but you guys figured it out. Good job. Whenever I hear people talk about, this obsession of like end times prophecy and saying, clearly we live in the end times, I sit there and think, what arrogance is this to sit here and think that you somehow are experiencing things harder than anybody else ever has in the history of creation? That's a pretty big leap of logic to go to, but yet that's what a lot of people are really implicitly saying whenever they start taking stock too much in the here and now. They're basically taking this stance that, what's happening to me is important. And because it's important to me, it matters. And because it matters, it's something that I can put into my calculus about whether I choose to follow God or not follow God, whether I choose to trust God or not trust God, whether I choose to recognize His dominion or not recognize His dominion. An example of an individual who fell into this trap is actually the person of Job. So in the book of Job, you guys are going to read something here in a minute. But what this is going to come from is a place where Job, who never lost faith in God, was experiencing these tremendous trials in his life. Physical pains, emotional pains, it's financial pains, everything you could possibly think of. Job was having to deal with it. And in the middle of his pain and his agony, he started forgetting that God is in control. He started thinking that maybe God was not giving him the respect that he was deserved as an individual. And as a result of that, God had some choice words for him to remind him of the fact that he is in fact not as significant as he may think he is. Now, I hope you're still with me because this is where we actually get to the cool part. Think about everything we've just discussed and how God has complete dominion over all things, that the things of this world are not truly significant. All the things that we dedicate so much of our life towards are things that in the scope of history really will most likely be completely forgotten and will certainly not actually have an impact on how the earth spins. Think about all those things and think about the supreme dominion of our God. And then remember how God reached down to this earth. Remember that it was that God that came down and said, I'm going to come down to this earth in the form of Jesus Christ. It was that God who embraced the sick. It was that God who served the poor. And it was that God who willingly died on a cross so that we, individuals that are not significant, could be reconciled back to Him. When you start looking at it that way, you can see exactly how massive of a demonstration of the love of God it was for Christ to do what He did. And in doing that, you can see how much God desires to have a relationship with us. It's not because He needs us. It's not because His glory and His goodness is dependent on us. It is because God desires us. It's because God desires you. That is the whole point of the Bible. Not to sit here and explain how we can sit here and become something that's bigger than ourselves and great and powerful and self-help and all that kind of mess. It's to explain to us that you in and of yourself don't amount to much of anything. But yet God still loves you because you are a reflection of Him. That is why it is so important for us to recognize that the world is not about us. It's because once we decrease, God can increase. And in doing that, we can see the beauty of exactly what God is doing in our lives and how massive of a gift His gift of grace is. That's our lesson that we have for you today. I hope you're able to get something out of it. And until we can meet again, God bless.